Okay, folks, just want to show you an example here. The one that we have in the slide set, the probabilities were all equal. In this case here, we're mixing things up a little bit. Probabilities for each case are different. So just to refresh what's going on here, we have a set of data. We have three probabilities for three separate possible values for the amount of oil that's in the reservoir. We see here we have a 40% chance that we have 20 million barrels. We have a 48% chance that we have, a 44% chance that we have 48 million barrels, and a 16% chance that we have 100 million barrels. Now, we know that those are our three probabilities. If we want to narrow it down more, we will do the appraisal. So doing the appraisal will narrow down which one of those three situations are true. Now with these appraisal trees, we're going to determine whether we should do the appraisal or not based upon these values. So the top situation here is where we're going to do the appraisal. So we're going to we take our set of data and figure out which one of those three situations is the actual one. So in this case here, we're going to look in each case here. So if we do the appraisal, we still have the three possibilities that will happen here. If we do the appraisal, we're going to find out one of these three things are going to be true, either the 20, the 48, or the 100. Doing the appraisal, then we can then build the appropriate facility or do the appropriate scaling or take the appropriate measures to accommodate whatever the amount of oil that we have. So in this case, when we do the appraisal, we do have the decision in each case to develop or not. Okay. The one on the bottom here is the case when we don't do the appraisal. So basically, we know we have those three possibilities, and we're taking a chance. We'll build a general facility in that case, or we'll do a general, non-specific type facility to potentially accommodate all three possibilities, and we'll just take our chances and get what we get. So again, the top in this case here is we do the appraisal and we narrow down which of the three possibilities we have. On the bottom here, we know those three possibilities, but we're just going to ride with the probabilities and just take a chance of what we got. Okay, so let's look in this case here at how we would figure out whether to do the appraisal or not. So all these values here, as we see, we have net present values here in this case. So these would be the overall cost or profit of the project, given that we go forward with it. So let's start up top here. Let's look at the appraisal situation. So again, we have three possibilities. If we do the appraisal, there's a 40% chance that if we do the appraisal, we find we have 20 million barrels. If that is the case, we can develop it, and we will have two possibilities. So if we do make a facility with for 20 million barrels, we are stand to lose $8 million. Okay, so we're going to lose $8 million in this case if we do the facility. However, if we do nothing, in this case, we'll lose $2 million. Okay. Now, in the example that was in the slide set, the no values were 0 in this case, but I kind of made it a little more realistic here. Usually, if you don't choose to develop, there is some cost associated with that, whether that be overhead, working with some staff. Sometimes there's penalties implied if you don't develop a piece of land within a certain amount of time. So in this case here, if we find out, we do the appraisal, we find that we have 20 million barrels, and we don't develop, we'll lose $2 million. If we do make a development, we'll lose $8 million. So in this case, when we get to these yes or no decisions, we're always going to take the lowest of the two. So in this case, I'm going to select, we're going to lose $2 million. Okay, that sucks, but it's better than losing $8 million. Okay. Let's look at the second possibility here. So again, we are going to do the appraisal. The appraisal comes back. We look into our data a little bit closer, and we find that in fact we have 48 million barrels. In this case, we build the appropriate size facility, and we do develop it. We'll make $5 million. If we just decide to leave it alone, we'll lose 2. So which of those two we're going to choose? Of course, I'm going to take the $5 million over losing 2. In the third case, this is if we're really lucky here. We do our appraisal. We investigate further into our reservoir. In this case, we find that we actually have 100 million barrels. In that case, again, if we build the appropriate facility, we'll find we'll make $10 million, and if we don't do anything with it, we'll lose 2. So again, the decision in this case is to take the $10 million. Okay. So now if we want to see how those probabilities affect everything, so again, we still have those 3 chances. We haven't actually found out here. We're just sort of thinking hypotheticals in this case. So if we do the appraisal, these are 3 possibilities. And here's what we possibly can get from the appraisal. So in order to figure out what that looks like with one number, we're going to associate those values, those -2, +5, and 10 million, and associated the probability that we already know about it, and to figure out what that value would be in the end. So looking at it here, so I'll just do it up here, up top here, and the way we tackle this is that we take the value, the net present value, and we multiply it by the probability. So I'll take -2, and I'll multiply it by the probability here, 40%, or 0.4. Okay. Then if you notice that all of these values come into this UR block here, this summation block, so what I'm going to do is going to keep adding through here. So I'll take the next one and I'll add it to it. So the next I'll have 5, and the probability of that is 0.44. The third case here is the 10 million. So again, I'll add to that. So I'm going to add to this one again, and that the 10 million, and the probability of that one is 0.16. Okay. Adding all those 3 together, if you do the math on that, you end up with a value of $3 million. So adding all that together is equal to 3. And the 3 in this case would be the value that comes on the other side of that UR. So again, if you want to see this a little bit, I can say this is 2 here. If we do this development, we'll get 5 on the inside, 10. Multiplying by the probabilities and adding them all together, we get $3 million on the other side here. Okay, so that's the average value here. If we do the appraisal, we statistically speaking, the average value that we'll get through that is $3 million. Okay. Looking at the second case here, down below where we do not do the appraisal, we just keep our existing data, build a general size facility, and see what the dollars will come up in that case. So in this case here again, we still have the same probabilities. Notice the same probabilities that were up here above as they were below. So 0.4, 0.4, 0.44, 0.44, 0.16, and 0.16. Okay, those will always be the same because those are the numbers that we started with. We haven't done an appraisal yet. We're not doing it. Either way, we're still going to have those same values. So in this case, again, we're building a general facility, so the yields are a little bit different in this case. We still tend to lose the -8 +5, but in the 100 million this case, we're not at +10, we're at +8. This is probably an example of this would be we're building a medium-sized facility, and the facility's not big enough. Yeah, we're going to make money because we got tons of oil, but we're not at our full potential. If we built a bigger facility, we may have a larger throughput, maybe more efficient, so we're not going to get quite as much cash out of that one as opposed to if we build the larger facility. Notice in this case too, we don't have the decision not to develop in this case. With the benefit of doing the appraisal in this case is we can make that decision. If we find out we do the appraisal, we find we have 20 million barrels, we can shut down before we even break ground at all. We don't have to build a facility and find out we're going to take a large loss in that case. We can simply decide not to develop. This isn't the case in the bottom course here because we built the facility ahead of time without doing the appraisal. So the math again is very similar in this case. So we have 8 + 5 and -8 + 5 and +8 in this case. So we'll do the exact same math in this case. The only difference here is we don't have a choice yes or no. So we'll take the -8 and multiply it by the 0.4. So I'll just put it right here. So I've got -8 multiplied by 0.4 plus 5 multiplied by 0.44, run uphill a little bit, plus 8 multiplied by 0.16. Adding all those three numbers together, you will get a value of 0.28. And if you want to see where this sort of lies in the graph here, this comes out right after that UR circle there. So in this case here, this is the average value that we expect to get if we do not do the appraisal. We will get roughly a value of 0.28 million. Okay. In this case here, we have a decision to develop or not. We can go through this or not. We have another decision block. So in this case, 0.28 is larger than 2, so we will take the value of 0.28, and this will follow through over here. So no, we don't do the appraisal here. This value is 0.28. If that number turned out to be -5 or -3 or any number that's lower than -2, we would then say the no decision and take the -2 across. Okay, so now if we look at the appraisal decision here, we have two numbers. We have, on the yes side, we have $3 million. On the no side, we have 0.28. So if we do the appraisal, it's $3 million. If we don't do the appraisal, it's 0.28. So it sounds like a no-brainer in this case. We're going to do the appraisal. But we also have to take into consideration here the cost of the appraisal. So the $3 million is what we'll get if we do an appraisal, build the appropriate facility. That was the average cost we should get. But that cost of that appraisal, information is never free in this case. It's going to cost us an additional $2 million here to do that appraisal. So we have to take that into account as well. So the 3 that we had here before, we have to subtract that from that. So we'll take $3 million and -2, and this will have us a value of $1 million. Okay. So if we do the appraisal now, we will tend to gain $1 million. If we don't do the appraisal in this case, we'll tend to gain 0.28. So in this case here, fairly simple decision in this case. I have, if I do the appraisal, I'll tend to net $1 million. Again, if I don't, I'll get 0.28. So in this case, the proper decision would be yes. Okay, we will do the appraisal in this case. But just hypothetical in this case, if the case of the appraisal cost was more than that, let's say the appraisal case in this case was actually, we'll say if it was something like $2.75 million, in that case, what will happen is that we would take 3 minus 2.75, and we'll have a value of 0.25 in that case. During that case, if it was 2.75, the total cost in that would be 0.25 million. In that case, then it would be the appraisal cost would be too high. The 0.28 would be larger than 0.25, and then we wouldn't do the appraisal. So it all depends on how much that extra information, how much that appraisal costs in order for you to get that information. So again, what's slightly different from the one we showed you in the slide set, that the probabilities in this case are not uniform. The ones that's given in the book and the ones in the slides, the probabilities here were all 1/3. So they added all these numbers together, divided by 3. That will work as well. But in this case here, we'll have different probabilities. We have different distribution shapes. We will have to go through this way. So you take the value that you get through there, multiply it by the probability, and add them all.